Chapter 202, the main elements of the house. These are the things that we are considering, and the main elements of this house, like most houses, tend to be a roof, a wall, and a floor. Okay, the sub-elements that we could consider, things like windows and doors, and how they relate to everything else. So what we're going to try to do in this series is focus on these key elements and the sort of design considerations that you need to think about when you are putting these together. Now, outside of design considerations, we are also looking at potential client involvement. There might be things like budget constraints. It might be that in certain locations that things just can't be done. This is designed for a particularly cold climate, so it wouldn't necessarily be the same if you were designing for a warm, humid environment. So all the sorts of things that we are considering for this might not be appropriate for other situations. Nonetheless, we will still probably have a roof, we will still probably have a wall, and we will still probably have a floor, and also in the wall we'll probably have windows and doors. Okay, so regardless of the situation, we need to think about this in those sorts of ways. One thing we need to consider is whether the wall is going to be strong enough to hold the roof up, whether the wall is going to be able to anchor the roof down so it doesn't blow away, whether the roof is going to be insulated correctly, whether we go for a warm roof or a cold roof or a ventilated roof, a non-ventilated roof. Wall considerations would be, is it going to be timber frame? Is it going to be brick and block? Is it going to be something else? Okay, there's lots and lots and lots of different ways to make a wall. And then once we've thought about all of these things, then we got to consider openings. Okay, do we need to think about the positioning of this? Is this going to be affected by facing brick on the outside, or are we okay with just positioning these things wherever we want? On a timber frame building, you've pretty much got carte blanche to put things where you want. In the case of the cladding on the ground floor, then we've got to think of the size of the cladding and make sure that that corresponds to the door opening sizes. So these subtle little differences, or these subtle changes, are going to affect the sorts of things we do when we design. We come down to the floor. We've got lots of different floor options. In this case, I've gone for a ground bearing slab. In other situations, we might have crawl space underneath. So that would possibly mean tanking or making sure the whole thing was waterproof. We might have to put barriers down to stop gases coming up through our floor. There are all sorts of different considerations that we need to follow. And we follow those by looking at building code, whether it's the UK building regulations or the code in the States. So armed with that information, armed with some money from your client, the go-ahead from the client, the agreement of the building control people, the agreement of the planners, a suitable and competent construction team, then you should be ready to go. But none of this will be really feasible without a good sense of understanding the details that make up the construction. Okay, and that's what we're going to be covering in this series. Now, in the next couple of videos, we're going to look very quickly at some of the layering options that we need to consider, and then we can crack on with putting this thing together.